The courtroom buzzed quietly with murmurs and the soft rustle of papers as people settled into their seats. Journalists held their cameras ready. Police officers stood alert. Lawyers whispered final notes to themselves. At the center of all this tension sat a tiny girl, just 3 years old, gripping a worn stuffed rabbit in one hand and tightly holding the leash of a large, calm police dog in the other. Lily Anderson's small frame seemed swallowed by the wooden chair she perched on. Her wide eyes flickered nervously between the judge's bench and the defendant seated across the room. It was the first time Lily had been in a courtroom since the case began, and everyone present knew she was the youngest witness ever to appear in the city's legal history. The judge had allowed special accommodations: a smaller chair, frequent breaks, and, most importantly, her companion, Max, a retired police dog trained to comfort children in traumatic situations. Max sat quietly beside her, his intelligent eyes watching over Lily with gentle vigilance. He was more than just a pet. He was her protector, her silent anchor in a world that suddenly felt dangerous and unfamiliar. For months, Lily had barely spoken, trapped in a frightened silence after what had happened at her foster home. But today, everyone hoped something might change. Across the room, the defendant, Carl Brenner, appeared calm, but a flicker of unease betrayed him whenever his gaze met Lily's. Brenner stood accused of abusing several foster children under his care, a man who had passed all background checks, charmed social workers, and maintained a spotless record. But bruises, whispered cries, and strange disappearances had slowly unraveled the carefully constructed facade. Lily was the key. The prosecution had built their case on physical evidence, medical reports, and expert testimony, but without a direct witness, they feared doubt might creep in. And so, with great care, they brought Lily. Int. Courtroom. Continuous. The room had fallen silent. The prosecutor approached Lily, kneeling to her eye level. His voice was soft, but steady. Prosecutor. Lily, do you know why we're here today? She blinked, then nodded slightly, clutching Max's leash even tighter. Prosecutor, gently. We want to know what happened at your house, so we can help you feel safe. Lily's lower lip trembled. She looked down at her rabbit, saying nothing. Then, unexpectedly, she lifted her head. Her gaze swept across the room before lingering on a tall figure in a suit. Though her voice was barely above a whisper, what she said next promised to change everything. Int. Courtroom. Moments later, outside the courtroom, a handful of people waited anxiously: Lily's social worker, her therapist, reporters who had been following the case since the first whispers of abuse. Inside, the judge, a stern woman with decades of experience, adjusted her glasses and watched closely. Today, this wasn't just a courtroom. It was a stage where the smallest voice might tip the scales of justice. Lily's eyes drifted toward the defendant again. She gripped Max's leash so tightly her knuckles turned white. Max, sensing her rising anxiety, shifted closer and rested his massive head gently on her lap. The warmth of his fur seemed to ease the tightness in her small shoulders. Prosecutor, can you tell us what happened at your house? A pause. The room held its breath. Lily's hand trembled as she slowly pointed at the man across the room. 2 small words escaped her lips, soft, barely audible, yet powerful enough to silence everyone. Lily, that one. The phrase echoed in the air, a child's voice, a child's truth. And with it, the courtroom changed. Max's ears perked up. He let out a low, protective growl, a warning. A ripple of unease spread. Carl Brenner's face tightened. His eyes narrowed. Everyone in the room knew this was just the beginning, but for Lily, and for justice. It was a moment that would never be forgotten. GXT. Town of Maplewood, various locations, montage. Maplewood had always been the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's name, where neighbors waved from porch swings and children played freely until dusk. But the recent allegations shattered that peace. Whispers of abuse in a foster home had sent shockwaves through the town. The man at the center, Carl Brenner, had long been seen as a model foster parent, quiet, helpful, trusted. He passed every inspection. He had everyone fooled. It started with a few bruises noticed by teachers. Then a neighbor heard screams in the night. Slowly, stories began to piece together, a pattern too dark to ignore, and yet without a witness. The case wavered, until Lily.int.therapyroom-flashback. Dr. Helen Marks sat gently across from Lily in a softly lit therapy room, toys scattered around them. Max lay on the floor, breathing steadily. One day, Dr. Marks showed Lily a photo of Brenner. Lily froze, then recoiled, clutching Max's fur in terror. Max barked, quiet, controlled, but alert. It was the only time he had done that in a session, and it told Dr. Marks everything. Inti. Courtroom. Later, the defense tried to pick apart the prosecution's case. They argued the bruises were accidents, that Lily, traumatized and only 3, couldn't be a reliable witness. They portrayed Brenner as the victim. But the prosecution was ready. Medical experts detailed the nature of Lily's injuries, how they couldn't be accidental. Foster care workers testified about Brenner's evasiveness. And then, Lily's quiet, heartbreaking voice cut through everything. "Lily," softly. That one. It was enough. Int. Courtroom. Max's role. Max was no ordinary dog. A retired police K-9 trained in search and rescue, he had served the community for years. When he retired, he found a new calling as a therapy dog for abused children. He was calm, observant, and fiercely loyal. When Lily met him, she was silent, afraid, lost. Max didn't need her to speak. He only needed to be near. He would nuzzle her hand when she trembled, press against her when the nightmares came. And when her voice finally returned in whispers, it was to him. In Courtroom. Final scenes. As Lily sat on the witness stand, the courtroom seemed to blur around her, but Max stayed still, present, solid. When Brenner glared at her, Max stood, quiet but protective. The bond between child and dog was unshakable, an invisible tether of trust and healing. Lily wasn't alone. And in that courtroom, neither was truth. XT. Maplewood. Days later, more families began coming forward, sharing their own stories of abuse, long hidden in shame and fear, inspired by a little girl's courage. The town of Maplewood began to change. They demanded foster care reform, stronger oversight, real accountability. Outside the courthouse, Lily sat on the steps, Max by her side, his head in her lap. The cameras didn't matter. The headlines would fade. But what remained was this. A child spoke, a dog protected, and justice listened. The community rallied even more strongly behind efforts to protect children. Local officials announced plans to review foster care policies and increase funding for support services. Lily's story had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that even the smallest voices can speak truths that demand to be heard. For Lily, the trial wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming her life, turning fear into strength, and showing the world that even a 3-year-old can be a powerful witness when given the right support. Max, her silent guardian, remained by her side, a symbol of hope and resilience. Together they had faced darkness and brought light to a community desperate for healing. The aftermath of Lily's courtroom testimony rippled through the town of Maplewood like a stone tossed into still water. What had once been hushed conversations behind closed doors now spilled into open dialogue. The town, which had long turned a blind eye to whispers of abuse, was awakening, and the courage of one small girl had become a beacon for change. Local newspapers ran front-page stories highlighting Lily's bravery, Max's role as her protector, and the urgent need to reform the foster care system. Headlines read, "Child's Courage Exposes Dark Foster Home Secrets. Justice for Lily Sparks, Call for Reform." At the town hall, a packed meeting was called. Families, social workers, law enforcement, and elected officials gathered to confront uncomfortable truths that had been ignored for too long. Voices once timid with fear now rang loud with determination. Mayor Helen Carter addressed the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We owe it to our children to ensure their safety. No child should ever suffer in silence." Lily's story reminds us all of the responsibility we share as a community. Advocates for children's rights presented new proposals, increased background checks for foster parents, mandatory home visits, and better training for those involved in child welfare. Funding was requested for mental health services aimed at helping traumatized children like Lily. Mary Donovan, Lily's social worker, took the stage next. She spoke about the challenges faced by vulnerable children and the urgent need for support systems that truly protect them. Lily's voice was the spark, Mary said, but it's up to us to keep the fire burning. We must listen, believe, and act. The crowd erupted into applause. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, the trial continued. Each day brought new testimony, new evidence, and mounting pressure on the defense. The prosecution's case was solidifying, strengthened by the community's support and the unwavering presence of Max. For Carl Brenner, the walls were closing in. His once confident demeanor gave way to frustration and anger. His defense attorneys struggled to maintain their strategy as witnesses detailed patterns of neglect and abuse. Yet Brenner's refusal to admit guilt only further convinced the jury of his culpability. Lily's soon-to-be adoptive family, Sarah and Michael Anderson, had been deeply involved in the process. They spent months preparing for Lily's arrival, turning their home into a sanctuary filled with warmth, toys, and love. They had met Max during therapy sessions and welcomed him as an essential part of Lily's healing. "We're grateful for the community's support," Michael said in an interview. "Lily is strong, but she's still a little girl. With love and patience, we'll help her build a future free from fear." Max, now officially part of the family, was more than a pet. He was her protector and constant comfort. In the weeks following Lily's testimony, support groups formed in Maplewood for foster children and their families. Workshops on trauma-informed care and child advocacy drew experts from neighboring towns. Local schools trained teachers to recognize signs of abuse and respond appropriately. Even law enforcement officers underwent refresher courses. The change was palpable, but the journey was far from over. For Lily, the days ahead held both hope and healing. With the support of her new family and Max by her side, her future was no longer a question of survival, but of thriving. As the jury prepared to deliberate, the entire community waited with bated breath. The tension in the courtroom was almost tangible as the jury filed back into their seats. Hours earlier, they had begun deliberations, retreating to a small room to weigh the heavy evidence and emotional testimony. Now, Maplewood held its breath. Inside, Lily sat quietly with Sarah and Michael. Max rested faithfully at her side. The little girl's wide eyes flickered nervously around the room, sensing the importance of the moment, even if she didn't fully understand it. Sarah gently squeezed her hand, whispering the kind of comfort only a mother could give. The judge called the courtroom to order. "Will the jury foreperson please stand and deliver the verdict?" A middle-aged woman rose slowly, her expression solemn. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. "We, the jury," she began, her voice steady, "find the defendant, Carl Brenner, guilty on all charges of child abuse and neglect." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom, followed by murmurs and quiet sobs. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others nodded, relieved that justice had finally been served. Carl Brenner remained stoic but visibly shaken. His eyes darted around the room as the weight of the verdict sank in. His attorneys immediately requested a motion for a new trial, but the judge denied it, emphasizing the overwhelming strength of the evidence. A sentencing hearing was scheduled. Brenner would face the full consequences of his actions. Outside the courthouse, news of the verdict spread quickly. Reporters swarmed Sarah and Michael as they exited with Lily and Max. The couple answered questions with grace and gratitude. "This verdict is a victory not only for Lily," Sarah said, her voice steady but emotional, "but for every child who has suffered in silence. We hope this sends a message that abuse will not be tolerated." Max, sensing the shift in energy, wagged his tail. A simple gesture, but one that brought a flicker of joy to a heavy moment. The trial had ended, but the story was far from over. In the days that followed, Maplewood's foster care system underwent a comprehensive review. Emergency meetings were held to implement safeguards to prevent future tragedies. Enhanced background checks, more frequent home inspections, and better training programs became immediate priorities. Mary Donovan was appointed to lead a new task force dedicated to child welfare reform. For too long, the system has failed children like Lily, she said. Now, we have a chance to rebuild trust and create an environment where every child is protected and heard. Inspired by Lily's story, a local nonprofit expanded its services to offer therapy, legal assistance, and emergency housing for abuse victims. Donations poured in from residents eager to contribute to lasting change. Meanwhile, Lily continued her healing journey with her new family and with Max. Though the scars of her past remained, so did her growing confidence and joy. Sarah and Michael watched in awe as she learned to trust again, taking small but steady steps toward a brighter future. They cherished every smile, every word, every night of uninterrupted sleep. Dr. Helen Marks, Lily's therapist, described this phase as crucial. Healing isn't linear, she explained, but with love, patience, and support, children like Lily can overcome unimaginable trauma and thrive. Max remained a steady presence through it all. His gentle eyes and calm demeanor reminded everyone that love and protection could come in many forms. The town of Maplewood had been forever changed. What began as a harrowing tale of abuse had become a powerful story of resilience, community action, and hope. Lily's two simple words, words that once shattered silence, had sparked a movement. As the sun set over Maplewood, a quiet sense of peace settled over the town. A peace born not of forgetting, but of facing the truth, of standing up for the vulnerable, and believing in the power of one small voice to make a monumental difference. If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.